It's one thing to struggle with the tinnitus, it's another thing to struggle so bad that you're borderline suicidal over
Exactly.
it. And if you haven't done CBD yet, I say do CBD like it's a like you're like, let's go buy some from Phil on the corner. Hey guys, welcome back to the Dr. Cliff Show. I'm Cliff Olson, Doctor of Audiology and co-founder of Modern Tinnitus, and I am joined today by a very special guest, Rebekah Perry, CEO and co-founder of Rowdy Wellness. Thanks for coming all the way out to
Thank
Arizona.
you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So today we're talking all about CBD and tinnitus. And we're not talking about smoking weed, guys. We're talking about CBD specifically, and hopefully that will make more sense to you as we get into the show here today. But Rebekah, give us an understanding of your background and how you even got into this world of CBD.
Okay, I was a soccer player at University of Georgia, and I actually had a friend who suffered a spinal cord injury, and that led me to working at the Shepherd Center, which is a brain and spinal cord injury rehabilitation hospital in Atlanta. And working there, actually some of the patients rolled out to the parking lot and lit up a blunt. And from there, they had a pinky twitch. You know, this is someone who's paralyzed. And just to see their pinky twitch changed their entire world, you know. And so I saw how much hope that this plant medicine brings. So that really, I wanted to provide more for my patients. And I saw what doors that opened up. So I went back to school at University of Maryland, which they have the nation's first graduate degree in medical cannabis. So went back at the University of Maryland Pharmacy School and in medical cannabis science and therapeutics, and really focused on heavily on dosing and really kind of educating how the product works in your body, and kind of naturally fell into tinnitus. I have a eustachian tube deficiency. So tubes, all, you know, going to audiologists and ENTs, and also my partner has tinnitus. And so we work just with our audiologist, Dr. Wyckoff in Atlanta, and just developed that relationship. And she wanted to provide CBD for her patients, which just kind of led us into this space. And I've been really supported by you all, and just happy to hopefully provide some hope for anyone with tinnitus, that we see you, your suffering is real, and hopefully this information can provide you hope to continue to find what works best for you and give you some relief.
Very neat. So kind of funny because your first experience with it was someone going out into a parking lot
Yeah,
and getting high to
yeah.
some degree, which is not dissimilar from my first story with marijuana. Going out into the parking lot when I was working, sorry, Mom, when I was working at Pizza Hut, ended up going out into the parking lot and smoking a joint with a coworker. Didn't feel anything right off the bat. I mean, maybe my pinky was twitching too. I don't know. But that was kind of my first introduction into marijuana. I honestly didn't like it myself. And in fact, I still don't like marijuana today. I've tried gummies and all that as well.
Mhm.
I've heard about medicinal purposes of marijuana, but I was just really uneducated on the whole subject,
Right.
because something that you had told me the last time that we spoke was that there is a difference between CBD and THC inside of, or with cannabis, right? So can you help everyone watching this to understand, like, what exactly is CBD and then how that's different from THC?
Definitely. So the term cannabis is like the big umbrella. And under that, you have THC and you have CBD, and you actually have other cannabinoids as well. But CBD and THC are obviously the most popular, but they can even come from two completely different plants. So THC coming from a marijuana plant, and most CBD is coming from a hemp plant. Completely different, but also how they work in our bodies is completely different. So THC is psychoactive, as we know, and CBD is not. It's not intoxicating. And why that is because of their activity at these receptors that we have in our bodies. So THC's goal, they're going to attach the receptor, and its goal is just to send the message. It's sending a message through, and that's what causes the psychoactivity. But CBD, it connects to these receptors, and it's basically acting like a doorman. If there's too much of something, it's going to block it and balance things out. And if there's not enough, it's going to open these channels and again find that balance. So its goal is homeostasis, which is finding a balance in your body. And that's when you see so many things in the media about CBD being helpful for your skin, for chronic pain, for anxiety, for gut health. You're like, how can this be, so helpful for so many different things, and it's just one product? That's because of these receptors spread throughout our entire body.
That's interesting. So like the THC, that's like the high, right? So you've got them binding to these, what are the receptors called?
So you have what's called your endocannabinoid system. Just like your skeletal system, just like your muscular system, you have an entire system of receptors spread throughout your body that we call endocannabinoid system. And you have CB1 receptors, which are located in your brain mostly, and then CB2 receptors, which are in your peripheral body, your immune system. So today we'll be talking more about those CB1 receptors and how that interacts with tinnitus. But again, it's how they, once they attach to these receptors, that activity and what they do. So again, that's the biggest takeaway from the differences between THC and CBD.
And so now you talk about the hemp plant and then I guess the cannabis plant, right?
Marijuana
The
plant.
marijuana plant, rather,
Yes.
yeah. So the marijuana plant and the hemp plant.
Yes.
What are the differences between those two plants? When I was in high school, we had kids who would wear hemp jewelry, right? And it was mostly like what we would call the stoner kids, right?
Yeah.
Which I was cool with all the stoner kids too. I was cool with everybody in high school, but they wore it. I think they wore it because of that link between the two, but they are two separate things.
Right. So the marijuana plant is like shorter, stockier, and has to be grown indoors. And then hemp plant, and that's just to indoor grow is just to contain how that plant is developing and how much THC you're going to be getting from that plant. And a lot of other more really detailed information with what goes into farming. But the CBD comes from a hemp plant, which is a real tall, skinny plant, which is also way more legal to grow in the US. But and now, actually, traditionally, the tobacco farmers are now kind of switching over to being hemp farmers.
Well, because I mean, it really all of this stuff is, I guess, depending on recent legislation, is legal to grow, right? I mean, hemp has been around for quite some time. I don't know if there's any restrictions in terms of growing hemp from a federal standpoint. Extracting the CBD maybe is a totally different regulation from that. Like what would you say about that?
Well, that's a big gray area with CBD is like, what is in these bottles? Is this product safe? Is what's in the product what's on the label? So that's where you really want to kind of do some research and figure out, make sure this is a quality product. And a lot of times it's not. So just finding a good product that has, especially for those with tinnitus, another big takeaway, I know we can get into this, but you want to have a pure CBD product. You don't want to have THC in that product. And there's a lot of CBD oils and, edibles that have THC and CBD in them. So you want to just focus on just having CBD because the THC can exacerbate your tinnitus.
Yeah, that's interesting because I have tinnitus in my right ear.
Okay.
And after our last talk again, I ended up getting the gummies. And I tried to find a gummy that had as little THC as possible and as much CBD as possible, like ratio-wise. And it still had some THC in it. And it gave me the same type of feeling that I got when I was in the parking lot at Pizza Hut, and I didn't like it. And it may have had a positive impact on my tinnitus, but I was so distracted by the psychoactive component of it. I just don't like things altering my mental state.
Yeah.
So to your point, you can't just go and try to get a ratio of THC versus CBD and think that that's going to be okay,
Right.
especially if you don't want the psychoactive component. But do some people do okay with the psychoactive component?
Absolutely. And it's actually called the entourage effect, where CBD and THC together work really great because the CBD kind of curbs those things about THC that you don't want. Like, okay, maybe I don't want to feel so high, so the CBD kind of like brings that down. And so that's great for some people, not for tinnitus, but PTSD, chronic pain, sometimes you do need that component to maybe feel a little more relaxed in your body. And that psychoactivity part does help. And maybe sometimes for sleep for some people, giving them a body high to help them relax to then fall asleep. But CBD does have a really important component of sleep that helps you keep you in a more stable sleep.
Well, that's good. You know, we talk a lot about sleep, and something that myself and Dr. Craig Casper track with our modern tinnitus Basecamp platform is that we're actually monitoring our patients' sleep, so we can see what percentage of time they're spending in their REM sleep, deep sleep, light sleep, all of that, and then total time as well. And I know that there's this really strong tie-in between CBD and improvement of sleep. And then you have the anxiety component to it as well, which we'll touch base on here a little bit more in a minute. When you're trying to acquire CBD, and we were kind of joking about this beforehand, like, you know, Phil out on the corner of the street, I'm sure he can sell me a product that has some CBD in it. I could go to Circle K and probably get something with CBD in it, but that you're saying that that's probably not the best route to go.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of different methods of intake, first of all, like edibles, smoking, or topical. The most efficient is going to be a sublingual oil, and that's a little bit different than most people have been used to because we're used to kind of taking a pill. But the oil goes under your tongue, and you hold it under your tongue for about 30 to 60 seconds so it dissolves into those blood vessels, so it goes directly into your bloodstream, bypassing the metabolism process. And that's the most efficient way to get that product into your system. It's also really easy to dose. So if you want to start low, that's our mantra. Start low and go slow. So research shows that small doses can be just as effective as large doses, which is great because sometimes these products can be expensive, you know. And so having something that can last you a month or two, you know, in one tincture is really, you know, exciting to have something that maybe can be a tangible product someone can go to that they feel comfortable with using, and it's individualized to them.
Do you think that larger stature individuals need higher doses? I mean, because when I think of like all these endocannabinoid receptors inside the body, you probably have more of them as a larger individual, so you probably need more CBD to be the
Well,
doorman for all of these receptors.
everybody has different sensitivities, and a lot of people are highly sensitive. So it really depends on the person, and you kind of have to try it and see where are you on that scale? Are you more sensitive, or do you need a higher dose? Mostly you can go with a lower dose, most people. And you kind of just want to find that sweet spot, what works for you. Again, it's a little bit harder because CBD is not something that you're going to feel immediately. You want to take it consistently for about 3 weeks. And it's a little bit harder with those with tinnitus because you don't want to bring attention to your tinnitus, but kind of just, you know, be aware of yourself as you're dosing. Like, okay, maybe I did get some good sleep, you know, and again, if you're tracking, then you can just look, I did get better sleep these past 3 nights, you know, I am feeling a little bit better. And some feedback from some of our patients has been like, it gives you more of a buffer before whatever that trigger is that happens exacerbates the tinnitus. So it's kind of giving you a little bit of a protection for your nervous system.
You know, it's interesting because clearly you work with patients who have tinnitus and you're using CBD to treat that tinnitus, and you probably have other, you know, support that you give them counseling-wise on the whole aspect of it. But, you know, the one thing that's interesting about individuals who have tinnitus is that they're willing to try literally anything, and sometimes they try like 17 things at one time, and then you're not really sure what thing works and what thing doesn't work. Do you generally recommend that, like, if you're going to be doing CBD, don't like combine it with a bunch of other stuff at the same time?
Well, as far as like any other drug interactions, you do want to be aware of that CBD can make those other things more effective. So even if you're taking, you know, a blood pressure medication, you want to be aware that this CBD can make this more effective. So I might not need as high of a dose that I'm used to, which is great because maybe you can wean off of some of these medications that you're relying on. But you do want, you know, make your physician aware. A lot of times they might not want to kind of go into the CBD space, and that's where I kind of fill that gap, is like making sure they're aware of, you know, some of the things they want to space out between these medications, the timing, the dose, how to take it. But yeah, pretty safe product. Even like the receptors that we talked about in our brain, there's not sparse to little CB1 receptors in the area of the brain that controls heart rate and breathing. So that means no fatal overdoses. So that's why, you know, it's a little bit safer to go this route, and it's an alternative medicine, a plant medicine, but something that's where I came from. I came from athletics, and I see athletes using pain medications and actually, overdosing.
Yeah.
And so that's really where this all started from, and having an alternative safe medicine to go to. But it does help just to say, don't worry about overdosing. Of course you don't want to, waste your money on overdosing on the product, but you don't have to worry that this is going to do something that, you're going to regret. So,
Right.
especially with tinnitus, when you're trying to figure out what works best for you, you can dose it throughout the day. If there is something that triggers you throughout the day, it can be helpful in the moment, as well as taking it consistently and bringing down if it's the stress, if it's the inflammation, but also some direct correlation with tinnitus happening in your brain, which I'm really excited to share about.
Yeah, and we'll definitely touch base on that probably a lot here. I do want to go back to this point of the dosage of it,
Okay.
because you're talking about, well, there's a couple variables that go into the dosing. Number one, like what's the minimal dose that you can take to get benefit, and then the other component is cost of dose, right? So if someone's like, you know what, I don't care about the cost, I just want to optimize this, they don't really have to worry about taking too much then.
Right. You don't have to worry about taking too much. And again, you can be super sensitive. So your endocannabinoid system can be sensitive. So again, with someone who is taking the THC side, the psychoactive side, that's where you really have to be aware, because it does take time to come down off of that. If you're really sensitive, it's going to take longer time, and you're not going to want to feel that way, so definitely to be aware on that side of things. But for the CBD side and finding that right dose for you, it's more about like, tracking how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And again, because it's not something that you're going to feel while you're taking it. It's
Right.
something that you're going to see over time, and how that maybe is helping some of these other things that make tinnitus overwhelming.
Right, and so someone who's nervous about like going this route, the clear, which myself as well, because I do not like the feeling of the THC.
Right.
You want to make sure that you're going with an isolate form of the CBD, like you said. Probably the oils are the only way that you can get an isolate.
No, they do make some other it's definitely more on the rare side, because most people, like, it's basically recreational market versus the medical market. Most people are making more money off of the recreational side, so not a lot of people are focused on just providing, a medical product. So yeah, an isolate, they can make it. It's kind of rare to find, but the oils are going to be definitely easier to find. And most of the people in the dispensaries, once you ask, like, this is exactly, as long as you want a CBD isolate oil, they can get you in the right direction for sure.
And it is possible to get 100% just the CBD. Like there's not even going to be trace amounts of the THC if you get an isolate.
Exactly.
Excellent.
And so there's a full spectrum, a broad spectrum, and an isolate. So full spectrum has the THC in it. So that means it can be a low legal dose of THC, or it could be a higher dose of THC depending on what state you live in, but that's going to have CBD and THC in there, maybe some other cannabinoids. The broad spectrum does not have THC, but it has other cannabinoids in them. So it could be CBN, some other cannabinoids that can be specifically helpful that research is finding for specific things like sleep. So that's something that in the future that would be exciting to kind of dive into. But as of now, just that isolate that has pure CBD has been basically the most comfortable to go to. And again, I leaned into the isolate product because this was for athletes who were undergoing drug testing. So we wanted to stay away from anything that might come up. And that's another thing that a lot of people may have to do that for work as well. So going with that isolate is, is the safest way, especially for anyone with tinnitus.
Yeah, it's interesting. And to segue off of tinnitus here for a second, coming from a military background myself, I know a lot of guys with PTSD from the military, some of them still in the military with PTSD. And so, of course, they do drug testing all the time in the military. And so you can take an isolate CBD and be safe from the drug testing.
Right. Yes. And again, you want to have a trusted source that what is in that oil is exactly what it is. So you can, go into that knowing that that product isn't going to pop on the drug test.
Is there some kind of like regulatory body that actually helps control that?
Yeah, third-party testing. So it's basically like, our farmers grow the product, they turn that product, that raw material, into that oil. Then they send this oil off to get it tested. And so you can see exactly what's in this oil, 0.00% THC, so you can see that there's no THC in this, and that should be shared like on the product. And I mean, in Georgia, that's where I'm from, specifically, you have to have a QR code that's on each product that pulls up these tests that you then look at. So that's something to be aware of, and not every product has. But if you can find that, that's going to be the key to making sure that product is safe.
That's really cool. So let's talk then about specifically how we believe that CBD is having a positive impact on tinnitus itself. So we've been talking a little bit about sleep, anxiety, things like that. No matter what we do to treat tinnitus, usually we're treating like these underlying things that impact someone's perception or annoyance levels of tinnitus. We're not like specifically going in and treating the tinnitus itself. And so how is CBD then impacting these things that is ultimately impacting tinnitus?
So this is where I, had to learn a lot about what tinnitus is, and even just the auditory pathway, because it's so detailed. And so just diving into that, I just got a lot of information, and really excited to share that there is direct impact. So like we're talking about those CB1 receptors in your brain. Mostly, these are located on inhibitory synapses in your brain, kind of like the brakes of your car. So something that's happening too much, these inhibitory synapses are going to slow down, okay? But in the dorsal cochlear nucleus, where hyperactivity happens for tinnitus, these CB1 receptors are located on the excitatory synapses, and this is uniquely wired. So that tells us, that's kind of like the acceleration. That's the gas pedal, So that shows us that we can actually slow down that acceleration instead of just having to rely on slamming on the brakes. So we can slow things down by easing off that acceleration. And that's really exciting, because that CBD activating the CB1 receptors, reducing glutamate, which is reducing that hyperactivity, the excitatory synapses, bringing that back into balance for tinnitus patients. So that's really exciting to know that it is having that effect in that way in your brain as you're taking the product.
So that's interesting how it's directly impacting the part of the brain that is overexcited, creating this phantom perception of sound. So if you can regulate that, maybe not shut it off completely, because I mean, like you were saying, like you want homeostasis is the goal here. The goal is not to shut down or turn on or anything like completely. You want the nice balance there, right?
And these are similar pathways that we have understood in anxiety and pain perception. So it's not something new that we've discovered. It's just interesting to know that this is happening in that specific area where hyperactivity takes place in tinnitus, in the dorsal cochlear nucleus.
That's so interesting.
Right?
And so how does that then impact like sleep? Let's talk about sleep specifically for a second, because that's something that we at Modern Tinnitus like care a lot about. If you're getting bad sleep, chances are your tinnitus is going to be worse.
Absolutely.
So how are we improving sleep with the CBD?
Okay, so it's not going to make you drowsy. That's the biggest thing. So you still want to do all those sleep hygiene practices that help you get to sleep. And again, this is a product that you can take throughout the day. So knowing that it's not going to make you drowsy throughout the day, but it's going to help with sleep. So it's kind of confusing, right? But what it does is once you are asleep, it keeps you in a more stable sleep. So it's keeping you into that intermediate to deep sleep. So allowing your brain to rest and recover. And again, that's such a game changer.
And this is different than taking like Ambien. We were actually chatting before the show started here about Ambien and how Ambien actually leads to some other negative side effects. So if you're trying to improve your tinnitus by improving sleep, going this pharmaceutical drug route may not be the best option.
Yeah, and as the more that we learn about the long-term effects of these things that we're taking every single day, that's where CBD can be helpful to even kind of wean off of some of those other medications, whether it is, alternating. If you still, you still might have to take Ambien, if you've been taking it for 10, 20 years, you still may have to, it takes time to wean off of these things, but knowing that you can alternate or even kind of wean off how much you're taking while you're alternating with the CBD. And again, it's totally different processes that's happening because it's not going to make you drowsy. But, you know, if you can get to the point where you're in that space where you can go to sleep, that's going to be the key to keeping you in a more stable sleep.
And so then would you typically end up taking the CBD like a certain period of time before you want to go to sleep? Or do you does it matter even when you take it throughout the day?
I usually say about 60 to 90 minutes before bedtime, just really kind of whatever works with your lifestyle that you can remember to take it consistently and allowing it to get into your system. But, you know, once you're asleep, once you can get asleep and it's in your bloodstream and it's, you know, keeping you asleep, you're still going to have a lot of time. That's why some people like edible products, because it does take longer, since it is going through the metabolism process, it does take longer to break down. And even as it's breaking down, it can become stronger through, you know, the metabolism process. So that's why a lot of people do like the gummies for sleep. But again, getting that product into your bloodstream is the most important, and allowing that to take its work on you as you're asleep. So I've also talked to people who have trouble going back to sleep once maybe they're interrupted at night, like they have to get up and use the restroom and then they can't go back to sleep. You know, so that could be something that is helpful in those times, because maybe you don't have to wake up, you know, and that may change your whole pattern of sleep.
So, you know, taking the edibles, if you were going to take the edibles for sleep, because of kind of like this delayed release effect that you're talking about, then do you want to take that even earlier than if you were going to do an oil, like 60 to 90 minutes before sleep?
Again, it's going to take about 4 to 6 hours for your body to break that down.
Interesting.
So definitely giving it a good hour before you go to sleep, so you know, 4 hours into sleep, now it's taking effect.
Right.
You know, so, and again, it's really different when you're taking edibles, because it depends also, like what you ate that day can impact how your body absorbs it into your body. So that's another reason why I do like the oil, because you don't have to worry about those things impacting that dose.
You know, I've been tracking my sleep for so long now. One thing I've realized is that within the first hour and a half of when I go to sleep is when most of my deep sleep happens.
Interesting.
It doesn't happen later on. I get a
Wow.
lot of REM sleep later on, but my deep sleep is like super early on. So if I'm trying to improve that or regulate that to some degree, for me, I would want to make sure that the CBD is in my system actually
Yeah.
functioning fairly early on in my sleep process.
right.
Otherwise, I might not get as much deep sleep as I want to.
Exactly. And knowing that that's happening can give you a time of when you should take that dose. So that's really
That's cool.
interesting.
And again, and I hate to keep hitting on this, but when you actually monitor these things in your body, like, and I like the idea of going based off of feel. And I think individuals with tinnitus, they're hyper aware of how they're perceiving their tinnitus and how they're feeling, right? But at the same time, your feelings can be deceptive. And I think that having some objective markers, even if you're an N of 1, like where you're just looking at yourself, you're not necessarily looking at, well, how does this work for other people? You can end up modifying dosage. You can end up modifying when you take the dosage based on what you're experiencing and what you see in your own data.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody's tinnitus is unique. You know, I don't think I've ever talked to the same person who has the exact same symptoms with their tinnitus. So we do need a intricate approach, you know, so what works best for one person is going to be totally different from someone else, but just giving them all of these tools to then take home and just know, you know, just the information I think provides hope. So that's our goal. It's not anything beyond that, just providing that hope, and hopefully that can help that person continue. Because one thing we haven't talked about is how this tinnitus can impact depression, you know, and that's a big thing that happens in this community. And I think it's important for the patients to be there for each other and share this information with each other and have all the tools that then they can say, this worked for me and this is what my tinnitus is, and maybe that's helpful for someone else.
Well, there's a running joke in the world of tinnitus treatment among audiologists, and that is once you've treated one person with tinnitus, you've treated one person with tinnitus.
Oh, I love
Like,
that.
because everyone is their own unique individual, and you
Yeah.
can't necessarily take what you know about this other person's tinnitus and apply it to this individual. You have to really get in and figure out what is it specifically about this individual that we need to know, understand, and modify our treatment recommendations for.
Right. And there's always something else going on. Someone might have cancer and tinnitus, so it's like we got to really look at the person as a whole,
Right.
and everything that else is going on, not just the tinnitus itself.
Well, everything interacts with everything, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the human body is all interconnected with everything. So, but let's talk about these other aspects. So, anxiety, depression,
Yeah.
right? And I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier with my military buddies with PTSD. A lot of anxiety, a lot of depression
Yeah.
amongst that group of individuals. So, how does CBD help to regulate that aspect of it, which also has an impact on tinnitus perception?
Yeah, so we're talking about like breaking that tinnitus loop, So again, the sleep is the first thing that we prioritize because if your sleep is disturbed, then everything else is heightened. But that is one of the biggest questions I get when I'm speaking to patients who have really just begun their tinnitus journey is like, I haven't slept in 3 months, and is it normal for me to be depressed now? And I'm like, yes. Just knowing your sleep is impacting everything, and it's so fundamental to your overall health, but again, taking a toll on you mentally. And knowing that CBD is research based can show that it can improve your mental state, lightening that mood, bringing you out of that state of fight or flight and bringing you back into more of a connected space. That is the key, bringing you out of where you feel stuck, and then that everything that once you're stuck in that space feeds that tinnitus loop. So if we can break that, whether it's through bringing you into a lighter state in your depression or in your anxiety or in your sleep, if we can break one of those, then hopefully we can lighten the state of the tinnitus.
Yeah, one thing I notice about my tinnitus is that when I have more anxiety, when my sleep is worse, the perception of the tinnitus is actually louder for me. And like you're talking about, I notice this louder perception of the tinnitus, this louder perception of the tinnitus, and then it makes me more anxious. And so it's just like, it just keeps cycling on itself. And so if there's a way for me to ease the anxiety, and I think there's a lot of things we can do to alleviate anxiety, but if you've tried a lot of different things and you haven't actually gone down the CBD route yet, that could be the thing as an N of one of everyone being a unique individual. That might be the thing that actually helps you out substantially more.
And I think just having a tangible product, because I know how important cognitive behavioral therapy is and how, everyone needs to have all these tools and even tracking, that could be helpful to know what your body is doing. But having a tangible product could just give you ease that you're reaching for it, you took it, and now I just did something that's going to help.
I think that's a big thing for a lot of people. A lot of people are not like, you know what, I'm going to go exercise more. I'm going to do all these other things. I'm going to do breathing exercises, which I love. I love all that stuff. I think it works for me. But there's a lot of people who don't want to do that, and you are absolutely right. Some people just want to take a product and they want that product to help them. And if they're not going to do all the other things, then why not do something that you're actually going to do and has potential of showing significant benefit?
And I want to point out the lifestyle is, if you're sitting in traffic and, loud, honk of the horn exacerbates your tinnitus.
Then light up a joint.
Yeah.
Right? No, sorry, off track there.
Oh my gosh, as long as it's CBD, then okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, so just for the record, you can't drive and have THC in your system, right? I think that's driving under the influence in most states.
That
So,
definitely is.
so yeah, don't do that.
Unless it's CBD, then you're
Yeah, right. Yeah, a CBD joint. Just smoke some hemp, I guess. I don't know. But no, I totally understand your point. There are triggers that people have that set them off.
That you can't just start meditating, while you're driving, and you kind of you do want to address it as it first starts. If you can, even for, say this presentation, research shows that if you take the CBD before, it can bring you into a more balanced, more relaxed state. And yes, I do rely on CBD for anxiety, even for gut health. And again, that gut-brain connection is so important as we're learning. So I think just keeping you in balance and knowing you can have something to rely on to if you do get off balance, that you can reach for, and hopefully incorporating all those other things while you're driving. Yes, let's do some deep breathing, but just something that you can, whatever works for you,
Right.
works for you, but having something that you can reach for and take, something a little bit different than the other tools.
Right, right. And so I think there is still a stigma around it, and we were talking about actual, marijuana and THC, CBD. I think that there are some individuals out there who are like, well, not really sure the research is there yet to say definitively if I take CBD, it's going to help regulate these
Right.
things, it's going to improve my tinnitus. So you've actually got education around this, so it's becoming more mainstream.
Sure, yeah, and again, that master's degree that I do have in this is the nation's first graduate program in this. So it's just now starting. So we're not behind, if you're just now learning about all of this, and especially learning about the endocannabinoid system, like that's in even at the base of each hair follicle, you have an endocannabinoid receptor. So it's like, wow, this was here the whole time, and I've taken all these science courses, and that, I never knew that until I focused directly on medical cannabis. So yeah, I do think that the research still, is catching up, but really the information is what's pushing this. And I have also found like the patients are pushing this, their response and how they use this and it helped, their testimonials. Like I'm learning as much from them as they are from me, so I think that's really important part of the process. But most of the research out there right now is on cannabis and tinnitus, and that again, that includes THC. So it's not on CBD alone. And that's where that big misconception kind of is, and where you have to kind of be aware of the differences.
So that's going to kind of throw off the research, right? Because you essentially have these multiple different compounds that are going to be impacting the system. And anytime you're doing research, you want to control the variables
Yeah.
really well to say like, if we're going to measure an impact, we want to know it was from this one thing. But if you
Yeah.
start mixing all these, you don't know what the positives and negatives are because you don't really know what you're measuring.
And they're completely opposite. That THC is sending a signal. Yes, something that's already hyperactive and you're adding a signal to it, yeah, it's going to be worse.
Which is probably why when I have THC in my system, or alcohol, interestingly,
Yeah.
my tinnitus perception goes up dramatically.
Right.
And so if I was an individual in a research study that had THC component mixed with the CBD, I would be like, this is making my tinnitus way worse.
Right.
And it's going to throw off essentially what we're looking for.
Exactly.
So there are individuals out there who are looking at this, and I think that any research is going to come from, anecdotal stuff first, where, professionals who are actually evaluating this on their patients, and they end up believing that there is an impact, and then it eventually, you can't ignore it anymore, and it ends up working its way into people doing research, as long as government entities don't prevent that research.
Exactly.
So what type of stuff are people looking at right now?
I mean, that's where I would ultimately want to go with this, and my intrinsic motivation in this tinnitus space is to have that study, grow this research to then be able to say this, is scientifically proven. But again, it's mostly focused around those psychoactive products, and other psychoactive products that are lab made are kind of popping up as well. So again, definitely like a lot of money is made in the recreational side of cannabis, so that's where the focus goes. But on the medical side, and you guys have been so supportive, this audiology community has been so supportive of, this information, and I think that's where we can really start together. And I know Dr. Whitelaw at Ohio State, she is educating her future audiologists on CBD as a tool. And I think, as we create more medical cannabis professionals in this space, it's going to eventually evolve.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I remember watching a documentary, we briefly chat about this as well, a documentary probably 10, 15 years ago about how there were professionals out there who were like, listen, my patients who have high anxiety, depression, or suicidal, they're getting benefit without having to do, pain as well, without having to do pain meds or all these other, drugs that are out there to try to control these things. They're actually getting significant benefit from what I would believe to be the CBD side of things with that. And here we are 10, 15 years later, and I feel like we have had some movement with this.
Right.
In fact, you have a couple books here in front of you from different doctors and individuals who've been taking a look at this connection between CBD and how it impacts the body.
Yeah, and I definitely heavily rely on that information because it is so specific to specific conditions that have been looked at, how we understand epilepsy, anxiety, chronic pain. So those aren't that far off from the loop of tinnitus. So what's happening with tinnitus? It's not really, something completely different. I can make inferences from the two and understand how the pathways work. And just knowing CBD side and how the whole goal is homeostasis, I understand how the two can be beneficial.
So let's talk about these books here a little bit. So you have two of them here. Which one we want to talk about first?
This one is definitely kind of my go-to with anything. Like if someone that I'm speaking with who has tinnitus but also has something else going on, this one I'll go to for, any of those other side effects, side symptoms. I would go to this one.
This is by Dr. Bonnie Goldstein. There you go, guys. I'll try to get it in focus here for you. I'll put a link to this in the description of the video. I'm sure you can find it on Amazon, right? We'll put an Amazon link on there.
And it does include, stuff about the psychoactive side of cannabis too, but it definitely focuses a lot on CBD, which is what we're needing. That information is what we're needing.
Gotcha.
So this is, healing everything from anxiety to chronic pain. So a lot of different things. This one is where I can find my tinnitus inferences because we're talking about the brain. And so this is really, really detailed and really, you gotta dive in with it to understand.
Get your highlighters out.
Yeah. This is where you're really talking about those receptors, but it's where you can fully understand what's happening when you have hyperactivity. And then you're adding in, how this can affect those receptors in your brain. So this one I love.
So this one right here, if it's a complex read, and here's the thing, I mean, we're both professionals, we work with patients all the time. If this stuff confuses you, I mean, finding a professional to work with is ideal with this.
Yeah.
Although there might not be so many individuals who are very specifically trained in CBD and how it impacts tinnitus.
Right. That's where I do those medical cannabis consultations. They're free, and that's been the key to everything because number one, it allows the person with tinnitus to be supported and let them vent a little bit. Let's hear the whole story from someone who hasn't heard it 100 times. This is something that impacts the whole family. So also something that even when I was preparing for coming out here, and I was at the house and talking about this with my partner who has tinnitus. The moment that I start bringing this up, he's like, it's louder. It's louder.
Yeah.
So it's that balance. You don't want to bring attention to it, but you want to understand it and learn it. So I think kind of focusing on the brain aspects and understanding that side of it versus the actual sound side. Maybe that can help you understand what's really going on a deeper level.
Now, I know that you said that you found that the audiology community has been very receptive to this. I have to imagine, though, that not everybody is. So if you're someone with tinnitus, you may go to a professional who even is an audiologist or a physician who works with tinnitus, and they just don't believe in it.
I think we're getting there, but it's definitely those ones who are really blazing the trail. Dr. Noelle Crosby is just my hero. She really just supported me in this whole journey, and you got to find those people. And I feel like the audiology community is really connected. So once you have one person, they're going to be open to be you need to talk to this person, So I think the people are out there. You definitely can find them, but it's not everyone, like you said.
Well, at one point in time, washing your hands before surgeries was looked at as crazy. Right?
Really?
Oh yeah.
My gosh.
Yeah, the person who invented that concept of hey, I think it's bacteria that's causing these infections in our surgical patients. And he's like, we should probably sanitize, wash our hands beforehand. And the physician community was like, you're crazy.
Yeah.
That's not going to have any impact, and maybe it'd even be negative. So I think everything has to go through that before it gets to the point where it's considered mainstream. And I think that if there's one area that needs to improve to get us to the point of mainstream with CBD and not just tinnitus, but like all these other medical conditions that could be
Yeah.
benefited from it, is that there has to be more research done on it, right? Like peer-reviewed research to get us to the point of global acceptance.
And honestly, it's probably going to take a long time
Yeah.
for that. And so, coming from the cannabis community, I know that like we're like, well then forget it. Like we can't rely on this to happen. We've
Right.
been waiting so long that like now we're like, let's make sure this is safe, for this particular patient, and understand how it can be helpful, really dive into like what's going on inside the body, how the product works inside your body, but kind of just creating our own results and going from there. And that's kind of like where that bravery side of this whole thing comes in, is like, and just knowing I love this community because, like you said, they're willing to try, and most of the people that I've worked with this is like the last thing that they tried. So they've really gone through all the hoops, and that's great. Like knowing that you've been to your audiologist, and do you need hearing technology? That's kind of the first thing that I always say, like make sure you get checked, and do you need these devices first, before going down this road. But again, most people have tried everything, and
Right.
then I'm speaking to them and we're talking about them as a whole person, and seeing how we can balance out everything. But yeah, I think we're doing it together,
Right,
for sure.
right. Yeah, no, the tinnitus community is a very interesting community in a lot of good ways and some bad ways. I mean, I think there's a lot of individuals with tinnitus who are like, listen, I get that there's no like one thing that works for everybody, so I'm willing to try things.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, and I think it's a good thing. There's also a lot of individuals in the community who are skeptical, and even if there is something that has been shown to be beneficial, they're like, oh, like it's just all a scam anyway, right? And
Yeah.
it's kind of unfortunate, but I think that you're always going to have detractors in any area that are going to say, even if you do have supporting information to say that this is potentially beneficial, they're going to just discount it immediately.
And something that I've learned through the tinnitus community too is that sometimes, especially if you've had something for so long, that it kind of becomes your identity, and healing and breaking a cycle is really hard. And you doing that within yourself alone, it's really difficult. It's something that you have to like show up for yourself consistently every day. That's tough, and that's really where we come in to like just keep them encouraged to do that, But it's the side that I kind of found at Shepherd Center, where they're willing to do anything to provide some kind of change or hope, or even just helping someone else. Honestly, they kind of get to the point where like, okay, I know how to deal with it myself, and I'm kind of used to dealing with it, but I see this other person and they're really struggling.
Right.
So it's like that healing journey can be about you, it could be about helping someone else, but it's definitely, I always like to kind of talk to them about like, you're chosen, you're kind of chosen. Even someone who has vertigo, they kind of call it like a curse, and where does this come from, and how, and how do you get rid of the, because it's kind of like you've been chosen to kind of be on this path, and how you want to show up for yourself every day, and how you want to help others through that, and why you are even going through this, so it's kind of all those things that I like to just be there for them and know that they have a support system. And that's been my my whole journey through this.
Well, it's super important because I feel like a lot of people with tinnitus feel like they don't have a support system, largely, because it's something you can't, or like tinnitus specifically is something you can't objectively measure. It's something that's like all inside your head,
Yeah.
right? And so there's this almost like viewing that you're crazy or something like that because
Yeah.
you perceive this. In fact, when I first identified my tinnitus, I thought that that's just what a quiet room sounded like. It just had a ring
Right.
to it. And when I was in the military is when I was told that, oh yeah, you actually have a condition called tinnitus, and it's because of the hearing loss that you have in your right ear that's causing that perception, because I only have it in my right ear. But like when you tell people who don't have tinnitus that like I have this ringing in my head all the
Yes.
time, they're like, what? Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense. And I think that there's some individuals who get to the point and why I think this discussion is so important, because it's one thing to struggle with the tinnitus, it's another thing to struggle so bad that you're borderline suicidal over
Exactly.
it. And at that point, you need to do anything that has even potential benefit to try to address it.
Right.
And I think that, that is, if you haven't done CBD yet, I say do CBD like it's let's go buy some from Phil on the corner. But if you haven't, treated it with CBD, I think that that is a route that you absolutely need to go.
Right. It's a safe product, so it's something that you don't have to worry about a fatal overdose, those sorts of things that are a little bit different than some of the things that are out there and
Right.
prescribed to you from your doctor. So it's, just nice to know that there is something that's a little bit more natural and that can naturally work with your body. And our body is set up for this product. That's what really trips me out. It's like, how did I not know that my body is, wired this way and this product does this and works with these specific receptors? It's kind of just like, I think I should give it a try,
Yeah.
So it's like just working with your body to bring you out of that hyperactivity state, whatever that could be, inflammation even,
Right.
and bringing you down into a more balanced, more grounded state can really impact a lot of different things.
Well, I think that we've talked about a lot of things that would potentially resonate with individuals out there who have tinnitus. But I think that people still would like the potential to have more support. And so, considering that you do this full time as your
Yes.
profession, you work with CBD outside of just the world of tinnitus, but you've really kind of found like a niche here working with individuals who have tinnitus. And so, you mentioned that you actually do consultations with this. So,
Yes.
so again, let's just kind of discuss, like, if someone wanted to reach out to you and have you listen to their story and give them a recommendation on what they should do, how do they do that?
Rowdywellness.com, and just schedule your consultation, free consultation. We always just take our time and really break it down. And I think that really, again, just making sure they feel supported is a game changer, and just giving them some information to feel hopeful to try something new and start a different path, and maybe even educate on what's out there that they haven't tried. We always bring up the hearing devices, tracking, and
Right.
even linear. A lot of people don't know about linear either,
Right.
so it's like, and not every, a linear is expensive, not everybody can do that. But just knowing that there are things out there that people have gotten relief from.
Right. And I imagine that, I mean, the higher quality CBD products out there are probably a little more expensive than the lower quality.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not true. I don't know. But finding a quality product, and that's something that you can help guide individuals with as well.
Absolutely. And it definitely depends on, what state you're in, what options you have to just go. Do you have dispensaries on the corner, or can you buy online? CBD you can ship out into all 50 states, so that's helpful to know that you can purchase something online, or you can, if you feel more comfortable going to your local dispensary, I can definitely help with that as well. But mostly it's kind of just touching base about where their tinnitus starts for them. Is it in the daytime? Is it worse at night? Do they get triggered by certain things? Just kind of supporting those areas that they're struggling with.
Right. And I know I talked earlier about, like, if you do like 15 different treatments all at the same time, it's hard to know which one's having a positive impact. But I think it's an important thing here is that there are a lot of different treatments that you can do. You touch base on them. If you have hearing loss, especially, treating the underlying hearing loss with hearing aids is very beneficial. Linear, which is bimodal neuromodulation, has potential benefit. You have tinnitus retraining therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, just therapy in general, right?
True.
Controlling anxiety, exercise, physical fitness, breathing, controlling your state, CBD. Like, there's all these different things that you can do, and I think that everybody has either a singular thing or combination of these things that ultimately leads to the most positive outcome.
Sure. And I mean, you're not gonna get, negative side effects from exercise, having like a positive lifestyle that's gonna help you overall. So as much as we can encourage, becoming more healthy as a whole. And again, getting that good sleep is going to be a game changer.
Right, absolutely. So where would you like to see the world of CBD and tinnitus go here in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years? Like if you had to say, wow, this would be really cool if in 5 to 10 years from now, this is what we're doing with CBD.
I would love to see some real research come out. It's going to be coming from, these audiologists who see these patients and hear the results, but the biggest thing is going to be, how do we prove it, and I think the tracking is really cool because you can say, okay, your sleep did improve after you started taking this, so you do have to have the data driven results.
Yeah, no, I love it, and that's primarily what I care about, and I truly believe that we're going to start identifying benefits from that. I'm going to start doing it myself to
Okay.
see how much I can improve my sleep with it, because as we know, yeah, that the sleep, as you've mentioned multiple times before, is a direct impact on your perception of tinnitus. So, and I pretty much track everything about my life right now ever since we started our Modern Tinnitus Basecamp platform. But I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm going to start tracking.
That's
so-
awesome. That's
I already
awesome.
take my
I'll
CBD.
turn you into my patient with the base camp, and then I
Okay.
can see what you're doing. So
sounds great.
awesome, awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming all the way out here to Arizona to have this talk. I do have a gift for everyone who does come out.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give you this. As you can see, I've been drinking out of my Dr. Cliff Show
Oh,
mug, so you get your own Dr. Cliff
Thank you
Show
very
mug for you
much.
to
I
take
love
home.
it.
Awesome, awesome.
Thank you.
All right, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you click the like button. And if you want more information, I'm going to have a bunch of links down in the description of this video. If you are not subscribed to the channel with notifications turned on, go ahead and do that as well. And I'll see you in the next episode.